Thank you, everyone, for coming today. My name is Lindsay X. I'm a senior environmental planner with the City of Fort Collins. Thank you all for coming today, and thank you at home for watching as well. We are going to cover two different items today. First, we're going to talk with Bill Porter from the Laramie Humane Society is going to talk about, yes, I like the clapping, the regulations associated with raising goats in the city. And then Dr. Irlbeck from Colorado State University is going to talk about best practices related to raising goats in an urban environment. But before we kick off with our two main speakers today, who we're very excited to have, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on this issue. In 2012, I was approached by a couple of farmers, and they wanted to do a market farm in downtown Fort Collins. And we realized that our zoning and our land use regulations hadn't kept pace with some of our larger community goals. We know that in our last update to our city's comprehensive plan, local food became a priority. And we know, as we've seen a paradigm shift, if you will, around urban agriculture as a community and as a nation, that producing food locally is the direction that we're heading in. And so over this past year, we've worked a lot with the Humane Society, with different departments in the city, and with Colorado State University to develop a set of standards to do three things. So first, to allow community gardens and market gardens anywhere in the city. Second, to allow farmers markets in mixed-use zone districts. And that's just allowing where we have some residential. So in areas where we have residential and commercial, allowing farmers markets there as well. So people can be closer to their food. And then finally, animals. So in 2008, the city allowed chicken and hens to be raised, but now in July, council adopted regulations that also allowed for female ducks to be raised and 2 goats per lot, 2 miniature goats per lot. And the focus of today's talk is going to be on that very last portion, so about raising goats in an urban environment. And I want to give 2 key points before I turn this over to Bill. First, there's always been the question of, if I live in a homeowners association, can I still raise goats? And if your homeowners association says that goats and other animals are not allowed, then your homeowners association rules override the city's regulations. So you cannot raise goats if your HOA says you cannot raise goats. And then second, I just want to clarify a little bit about different roles that we all have here, because there's a lot of partners in the room. So first, the city of Fort Collins is the one who developed the regulations for all of the urban agricultural standards, for the gardens, for the farms, and for the animals. But the city contracts out to the Laramie Humane Society to do the enforcement of the animal issues. So they not only deal with dogs and cat issues, but they're helping us with chickens and with goats now as well. And then Colorado State University has been such a great partner in the educational side of this and helping for staff to learn a lot more about the different standards and best practices we should all be doing. So they've put together this excellent brochure. If you haven't seen it yet, it's called Healthy Living with Goats. So this is a great brochure if you want to raise goats in an urban environment. And you can look at our website at the city or go to Colorado State University's website to find this brochure. So with that, unless there's any initial questions, we're going to turn it over to Bill Porter, who's the Animal Control Director with the Laramie Humane Society.
Good afternoon. I'm Bill Porter. I'm the Director of Animal Control with Laramie Humane Society. Thanks, everyone, for coming out, showing your interest. We've done a lot of work. And when you look at the presentation, you're going to say, wow, that's a lot of hoops I got to jump through. That's a lot of laws you guys have. Well, the reason why is because we want it to be successful. We want to help the community who has done so much work to help start this. We want people to have knowledge, the skills, the expertise to do a good job. And so my job is to help you understand that and give some explanation why it is that way. We do have a few things that I'd like to discuss. Would be what type of animals. So we all are here for goats. Remember, they're just pygmy goats, dwarf goats, only 2. Their offspring, though, as long as they are 12 weeks or younger, that's fine. And part of the ordinance change, too, is to allow 6 more hens. As animal control, we haven't really seen any problems with hens in Fort Collins with the number 6. Some people are asking for more hens. Sure, 6 has been great, so I think 8 won't be a problem either. Still, no roosters. But if folks have lots of property, you can have more. So for every half acre, you can have more. So you can have 12 if you have an acreage of 12 to a half acre, 6 additional for each additional half acre. So some people in Fort Collins have a lot of property, so therefore it makes sense that they should have some more chickens or ducks. So what can't we have? Well, let's just go through the list there. No roosters. That has been our main problem at Laramie Humane Society, is people buy some chickens, some cute little yellow little chicks at Jack's, and half of them turn out to be roosters, and then, well, they start crowing and we get them. Laramie Humane Society does have some roosters for adoption for those who live outside city limits of Fort Collins. So what else can't we have? Well, we can't have billy goats in Fort Collins. Male ducks, the other types of goats other than the pygmy and dwarf. So I think I just put a alpine goat on there. Is that right? Potbelly pigs, they're not allowed either. And remember, this is not that we're doing this for milking. We're not doing this for the meat portion of it. So we're not to slaughter the animals for meat. So where do we keep these guys? I tried to put something in there that just made it really easy to understand. And I'm a picture guy. So I put some pictures up there, just like chickens. It needs to be 15 feet from your neighbor's place, the property line. Okay. Remember, it's on the back half of the property. And it's minimum of 300 square feet for the goats. Remember, they have to be fenced at all times. The goats do have to be in an enclosure the whole time. And lock them up in the enclosure at night from dusk till dawn, in predator proof. So what we're concerned of, coyotes, concerned of neighbors' dogs. So that's why we're having them protected. We also are concerned that they might escape. They are escape artists, as most of you know, and they will do everything they can to get up and out. And I'm concerned for them, concerned for these little guys be wandering around town, and a neighbor's dog gets them. So that's why we have them in a fenced area the whole time. Let me jump back to the 15 feet from neighbors. Just like the chickens, if your neighbors give you written permission to have it against the property line, then that's fine. And that's fine. Any questions on that?
If our neighbors move and we get new neighbors, would we need written permission from the new neighbors?
The permission stands with the property, so for you. So if you were to get the permission from one neighbor and then they move, the permission stands. That could be challenging, right? You build your whole coop or your shelter around your neighbor and then your neighbor moves. So keep that written permission and give a copy of that to Bill when you get your license if you are going to do that.
I am concerned about these enclosure rules because they're kind of confusing. The way I understand it, we need to have the goats in their own pen, which is within the yard, and it's just the covered enclosure, which is closed at night, so that they're in their own. I just want to make that clear for everybody, because I think everyone wants the goats to have an interesting habitat, but they do have to stay within their own fenced area, and when it says closed in from dusk till dawn, it means they have to be in their enclosed portion of their own little enclosure.
So licensing process for the goats. That's why we're here. We're here because we have an interest in this. And part of this is we're going to give a lot of information with this. For example, we have a reference handbook, great book, great resources, pretty much for everything you need. Our cost is $15, so that's what we're going to pass on and require. There is also some other information that we're going to give, and I'll go through that as a check-off list. So licensing in goats, the licensing for each goat is going to be $25, and that has to be done yearly. The reason for that yearly is because we're requiring rabies tests on it. As everyone's aware, we've had some rabies right here in city limits of Fort Collins. So we want to make sure that these guys are protected, and part of that is having the rabies vaccinations records in our system, and that requires us to maintain that database. The inspection fee is $50, and what we're going to do is come to your house, make sure you meet all those requirements before give you the thumbs up and say, hey, looks great. Now you can get your goats. Shouldn't take very long, but the inspector, who is a volunteer, and I think now's a good time to introduce her, Marty, who is in the back in the green shirt. She's a volunteer, and she will be helping us through this process and going to the house. And well, I think trying, if you are interested in it, we'll try to help you be successful in it. The licensing application, that will require to work with Marty, who we just pointed out. Also need to work with your veterinarian to get the rabies shots, and that is required yearly. Also, there is a test. You are welcome to take that with you, or you can just give me a call. I left some information for those who are interested in it, and then you can just take this home. It's an open book test. Just return it. It's like one of those things that you learn as you go through it. And by the end of this presentation, you should be able to take it. All the questions should be answered. It is open book, so you have this as a reference guide, this brochure, and also the ordinances. So if you're interested in it, grab a test. Make sure you pick up the ordinances too.
So is it going to cost me $115 every year to have a goat? Or how much will it cost me on that renewal?
Okay, so it's just a yearly goat license, $25 per goat. The inspection, it's just a one-time. It's $115 just to get going. There's no re-inspection fee. Will not be going out there every year to do it. And you already have the reference book. So it just makes sense to have $25 a year for the goats. Licensing fee. Remember, if you're late, if you get the goats before you get the inspection, there is a late fee of $25 per goat. And also, if you're late for renewing the goat license, it's also a $25 fee. Before we move on, any questions, clarifications?
Where do you get hold of the book?
See me. I brought a bunch of them today, and if you don't pick up one today, just give me a ring, a call, an email. We'll work something out so we can get it to you. Okay, so now I'm coming to the end of the presentation. Yes, at Larimer Humane Society, we do have adoptable animals, and I'm shameless. I want to get these guys into a good home. These are also up for adoption. You can have rabbits. No licensing fee, no inspection, no hoops to jump through. Chicken, that's my girl right there. We currently don't have any hens to adopt. We do have a few roosters, but no hens. All my hens, they came from Larimer Humane Society. All sad stories. You know, all escape artists or sad stories. But they're working out great. And so keep your eyes open at Larimer Humane Society for ducks, some rabbits, hens, and possibly some pygmy goats. All right, so how do we get this going? My information's on the screen here as well. Phone or email works. Any questions? All right, guys, thanks much. Thanks for helping put this together.
Thank you, Bill. All right, so now you guys know all about the rules and regulations surrounding goats. So that's everything that you're required to do. Now Dr. Nancy Irlbeck is going to talk to us about things you should do, best practices for raising goats in the urban environment.
Good afternoon. It's a good day, even though it's raining. Sometimes we need rain. So my presentation is going to be unique. And so I'm going to ask you, instead of interrupting or raising your hand to ask a question, to write it down. Because I, too, am very visual, and I have lots of pictures, and so I'm going to go through them very, very quickly. So jot them down, unless I've done something woefully wrong, then stop me by all means. Deal? Deal. Okay. So, collaboration. This is a wonderful collaboration that makes my heart sing between the city of Fort Collins, between the Humane Society, and between Colorado State University. And if we go, our jobs are all different, and our jobs as Colorado State are merely within the education route. So for questions within that realm, it'll be our bailiwick. Deal? All right. Let me give you a little history. It's important for me as a speaker to let you know where I'm coming from, because I'm going to make some statements that are judgmental. I'm going to make some statements that are a little bit biased, but I'm going to tell you why they're judgmental, and I'm going to tell you why they're biased. I'm a pig farmer's daughter. I come from Iowa. I grew up on the land. If you look at my hands, I still work on the land. They don't have fancy nails on it. I work every day. I have over 300 sheep, all right? I work with them each and every day. So I know what it means to work with the animals. I know what it means, the joy. You think, I'm going to have a goat. I'm going to have a little goat. And I know that joy. But I have some concerns. And from the very first day, I've had those concerns. But I also want to make it possible that through the education, we can make it a reality for each and every one of you who wants it. I'm a comparative nutritionist, an animal nutritionist by training, and you can look at all the critters, including the silly little wallaby, because I've been a zoo nutritionist for 23 years and spent time in Australia, so I've worked with many, many types of animals. This is Anaroon Sheep Company, and I call it Anaroons for Ana for animal, Roo for kangaroo, that makes sense, and NZ or NZ for New Zealand, because of living abroad and working with animals in all the different countries. And you can see some of the breeds. You won't recognize them, or I'm assuming that most of you don't recognize them, because we raise rare wool breed sheep. This is my favorite slide. I love this slide. This is me. I am the wolf in sheep's clothing. And so I've probably already caused you to go by some of the things I've said. I'm going to do it again. Changing views. I grew up on the land. My whole life has been spent living on the land and teaching agriculture. It is in each and every cell of my body. I believe in it. But now, and for a long time, we have found that those within agriculture were kind of like, oh my God, you're a farmer? Do you have manure in your shoes? Do you stink? Why do your hands look like that? But we're finding, exactly as Lindsay had indicated, an interest of where your food comes from, of putting your hands in the dirt and raising these animals, being a locavore, going to a farmer's market and know the individual who raised your food is becoming more and more important. And so we're seeing a merging of two worlds, and it makes my heart sing. I'm very, very happy for that. And if you leave today and I have left you scratching your head with a whole lot of questions, I've done my job. Because with that, you're going to look and you're going to find out a little bit more. I wasn't particularly for goats in the city, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't want to go boo hiss for goats on town. I'm going to let you walk through the process of why I made that decision. And I'm going to challenge you to do some research. I want you to ask those questions. I want you to say, hey lady, what's going on? Why can't I have a goat? Well, go online and look up images for goat fencing. Go online and Google. Everyone knows Google. Sometimes we use Bing. Goat problems. Call a state education. You now have the brochure. Talk to a veterinarian who has some expertise and who raises goats. Find a mentor. Someone who has goats, all right, and others. Now, this is a beautiful picture. This is those, oh, gee, that's me. I'm going to have my baby goat. Well, notice this one. It's kind of hard and wiggly, and that's in a world that everything is cool. But before you get to that point, it's going to take you a long road. It's going to take you a long road, all right? Let me give you some terminology. I'm going to start from square one because I'm assuming that many of you are struggling or just starting to learn this whole new world. And I have to applaud you and compliment you. And you're here, and that says a lot. So a father goat is a buck or a billy. We call that in the literature an intact male. That means he has his testicles. You do not want a billy goat in town. The law says we cannot have a billy goat in town. They are very smelly. They soak everything with urine. You do not want them. They are very aggressive. They can hurt you, and we'll talk about that. A mother is a doe or a nanny. Nanny goat, you've heard that verbiage, all right? Babies are called kids, just like us. Some of us are in second childhood, can't you tell? And a castrate male, that means we've removed, or the veterinarian has removed the testicles, is called a wether. All right, so we're on the terminology. Normal behavior. The first thing that you want to research is the normal behavior of an animal. They are not prone to sitting still. If they are sitting still, they're probably sick. They bounce. I have Nigerian dwarf goats in with my sheep, and they ping. I came home the other day, the baby goat was on top of the ewe, which is the female sheep, and they were looking at a turkey. Everyone bounce, then bounce to the other goat. And so they don't stand still. They bounce. So learn their normal behavior. You might want to provide something for them to play, all right? They're very intelligent. They bounce midair. They jump up, all 4 feet, jump up, just like that. From a solid standstill, they bounce right up, boink, 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 and they get into trouble. My mother tells the story when she was a child, they had to fumigate her house for something, and they had laid all of the school books and all of their storybooks and everything out. And back in the 30s, you didn't have a lot of books like you do now, maybe. The goat went and took a bite out of every book. So they're always getting into trouble, little shysters. Second thing, fencing. It's in Fort Collins rules that you have to keep them enclosed. 300 square feet. Get out your tape measure, learn your geometry to figure out what your dimensions of your fence can be. So if we go to the fencing, what kind of fence are you going to do? I like this one, but I think that the diameter of the holes may be a little bit big. It might be in height okay, but the concern is in the holes. Now goats, not only do they bounce, they climb. They are halfway arboreal, which means they like to go into trees. They like to go on top of everything. They want to look on something, and they can jump up to look. And so even with the tall fence, you notice where his neck is? Underneath the top wire. I can start to envision concerns if he were to be startled, and if that was a little bit too small, he could potentially hang himself. Look at this little goat here. You can't really tell because the slide is a little bit exposed, but it's been caught there for a while. And see, the hair is all worked off of its back because the hole was too big and the little goat went through. So you have to make sure that the small holes are small enough that they can't get out and they can't get through. This spring, I lost one of my lambs. Got his head caught. The bale of hay was on the other side, and he put his head through, and he couldn't get out. And he fought, and then he put his foot up, and he got his foot caught, and he died. And even though I'm there multiple times a day, he still died. Do you know how that hurt my heart? It's a reality. Enough said. You see that collar? One of my little Nigerians has a collar on her neck. I call her Kelly, she comes, I grab a hold of the collar, and I lead her where I want her, if she's in the mood. She could very easily get caught up with that collar, very easily. You'll go online, and as you Google fencing for goats, you're going to find a lot of electric fences. Sometimes electric fences hurt. Sometimes they work. My sheep, in particular, laugh when I put out electric fences. They take a run, and they go through. They know that it can't hold them. It only hurts for a minute. The inspector says no electric fences. This is just general education. Thanks, Marty. No electric fences. Don't go there. This just gives you a tape like they use, an electric tape like you use for horses. They won't work. They're not going to work. This is, I put just to kind of give you an idea. You can see in the back some of the fencing that I have. It looks a little bit better here. The combo fences that I have are smaller on the bottom, larger on the top. I don't think that's good enough. I think that the spaces should be even smaller than here because my little sheep got caught up in this one right here. And you don't want that to happen. So housing, let's talk about housing, because the enclosure where you have to keep them in at night, what kind of house are you going to build your little goats so that you can lock them in at night to keep them safe, whether it's from the neighbor's kids, from teasing them, to a coyote. And I had a mountain lion come in and took 4 of my young sheep just a few weeks ago. All right? So we are in that area. We are in that area. So little houses like this, is that going to be sufficient? Is a house like this? What are the problems with a house like this? What are some of those concerns? Just another, they're using straw for insulation. Is your neighbor going to be happy with you having all of the straw like that looking? Is your neighbor going to be happy if you leave the manure in the pen? So keep in mind from the neighbor's perspective as well as yours. This one I think is kind of clever. They're going to be on the top anyhow. Might as well help them. Boink, 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 boink. This is the one that I like the best. This one I like best because you just put in those little bars and it shuts down and they're enclosed at night. They have water, they have feed. Notice the fence. Notice the fence. I kind of like that. Space. They need space. The 300 square feet is at a minimum. A minimum. The more space that you can give them, the better. The more activities you can give them, the more happy they will be. All right? So enrichment with my little sheep, I use bales. Boink, 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 boink. The baby lambs are just like the baby kids. All right? Mental stimulation. Something to jump on, tires, buckets. Make sure that they can't get caught in it, particularly when they're little. Think about if this is a child, a human child. I know that it sounds a little anthropomorphic. Put in human-like emotions, but you want to keep them safe. So use your problem-solving skill. Is there any way, if you put out a bucket, can that goat get that bucket under the handle and caught? So start thinking ahead. Make sense? Make sense? Yeah? Yeah? You are awake. You haven't fallen asleep yet. That's a good. All right? Feeding. What are you going to feed them? I'm going to go down to the store and get some goat feed. Well, what's in the goat feed? Let's talk about it. First thing you want to think about is water. The snow is going to fly soon. It's going to be cold. Some winters are colder than others. They can't drink ice. They will not do as well. So you have to provide a heated source of water. And this is what I use. You probably don't want to go to the expense, but you don't have as many goats as I have sheep. So heated water. You can go to Jack's. You can get a bucket that you plug it in with electric so that they can keep it warm that way. There are some tank heater versions, but again, if there's a problem going to be had, they're going to find it. They're not dumb animals. So there's different ways of keeping the water warm, but use your problem-solving skills and say, is my goat going to figure out how to get electrocuted if I do it this way? You do not want to give them access to the electrical cords. They will chew them. They will get hurt. So how are you going to keep them safe and still provide them a source of heated water? What is a ruminant? The reason I go that, the goat is a ruminant. I'm going to give you the real quick version of how to feed this, because I could talk all day on feeding goats. It's an animal nutritionist passion. All right? So let's say, what's a ruminant? These are real simplistic. This is a carnivore. This would be like the cat. Anybody have a cat? Yep, all right. This is and a cat eats just meat. Okay. An omnivore is like the dog. The dog eats what? Meat and plants. The dog is not a carnivore, no matter what some of the books say. Sorry, guys. So plant and meat. What is a human? Omnivore. Good on you. All right, now, an herbivore eats just plants. All right? Notice that the digestive tract of an herbivore is much larger than the carnivore or the omnivore. And it's because meat is very digestible. Notice the little tiny tract? Looking at the omnivore, notice that there's a little more space. And now look at the herbivore. That means plant materials digest very, very slowly. And there is no animal enzyme to break down plants. And so what we need to, when we have the goat, is we need to keep in mind, how are they going to break down the plants that we're going to feed them? And this, I know it's a cow. I know it's not a goat, but it's the same picture. See this big rumen here? It says rumen paunch. There's a big rumen in your goat. Takes up a whole lot of space. And it needs all of that space because of all of the little microorganisms, the bacteria that break down the plant material, the cellulose, that's going to be in the plants that you're going to feed them. And so you need to keep in mind when you feed the goat that you're feeding those bacteria or bugs. all right? So you're going to have to feed the bugs. And therein lies a few simple rules to keep in mind as you feed your goat. Now inside that rumen, that very big, we call it a fermentation vat because the microbes are actually fermenting the plant material, are these little papillae, all right? Little finger-like projections that stick up. And what they're going to do is they're going to absorb the excretory products of the bugs. And that's how your goat gets its energy, are from the volatile fatty acids from the microbes. All right, so when feeding, keep in mind the bugs. A goat's most favorite food is browse. Browse includes trees, shrubs, rose bushes. Keep that in mind. They will eat weeds. They will eat weeds. You'll see as you go online and you do your research and as you read in the book that Lindsay was showing you, you'll find that some people use goats to clear weeds, and that's a cool use of goats, all right? But they will also eat flowers. Even if they're not in their yard, they will eat flowers if they can get out. And they love rose bushes. Every spring, at one time or the other, my sheep get out, and my rose bush gets trimmed every year. It still has very beautiful roses, but not as many. Some of you will be feeding different kinds of hay, because that has to be the most predominant part of your goat's diet is going to be a hay. Now you can feed alfalfa hay. In Fort Collins, the two most common are going to be alfalfa, or they're going to be a grass hay. Now alfalfa is going to be a richer diet than will the grass hay. And when you go down to Ranchway or you go to Jack's or wherever you go to get your hay, they're going to ask you, what cutting do you want? And you're saying, cutting? All I want is alfalfa. Give me a bale of hay. There's difference in the hay. I'm going to advise you, I have pictures of first cutting and I have pictures of third cutting. It just means how many times it's been harvested during the year. And every time that you harvested, the subsequent cutting gets richer. And so the alfalfa in the third cutting is going to be very rich. You do not need third cutting alfalfa for your goats. The only time you would ever even begin to contemplate that is if she were very pregnant or just starting to milk with her baby kids. All right? Otherwise, the first cutting or a second cutting is more than enough if you're going to do the alfalfa route. Or grass hay without seed heads would probably be the best thing all around. Because if you start to see seed heads, you know what I mean by a seed head? Yeah, all right? That means the grass is very mature and may not have enough energy for your little goat. So grass hay without immature grass. Hay is very expensive, $10 to $15 for a small square bale in some places. Now a goat, a pygmy goat, will take a long time to go through a bale, but that's still a lot of money. So you want to store it. And you might set up a little shed like this. I doubt if you want to keep it in your back porch, because if you keep hay in your back porch, you're going to get bugs, you're going to get mice. So a garage would work well, or some kind of shed like this where you can keep it away from the elements so it doesn't get moldy. You don't want to provide them the mold, okay? When do you feed grain? I want to give them a treat. They tell me they like grain like corn and oats or sweet feed. My horse likes sweet feed, right? Wrong. Dwarf goats, pygmy goats, have a very strong propensity for getting very fat. The fatter they get, the more you're going to go see your veterinarian. So you don't want them to get fat. They do not need grain. Give them healthy treats like a carrot or a slice of apple, a stick of celery. Healthy treats. A piece of your neighbor's rose bush. Did I say that? No, okay. So when would you feed a goat grain? Well, let me tell you, too much grain, you're going to make them very sick. Not only will they get fat, but remember those bugs? Remember those bugs? Bugs like to break down grain faster than they break down the forages, the hay. And so they preferentially break down grain, those little bugs in the rumen. You with me? Yeah? Okay. Well, what happens when they break down that grain, they produce an acid, another volatile fatty acid, and it lowers the pH. You remember chemistry from school? Yeah? No. Maybe. All right? It gets very, very acidic. And these papillae, remember those little finger-like projections, start to get matted. And this is actually from a sheep that died from acidosis, because the pH got so low that it burnt off those little papillae. It burnt it off. And it's a horrible death. They sit and they go, very painful. No grain, except for 2 times, and I'll show you when those are. And see, look at the pH here from another little, this case a goat died. And this is the abdomen, the inside of the stomach, around the intestines, because of the hemorrhaging that occurs because of that very low pH. So they don't need grain. Salt blocks, give them a block, a salt block. You don't need to use loose salt for goats in these scenarios. All right, now the big concern, one more. The big concern with sheep is feeding too much copper, because sheep look at copper in most scenarios and they're going to go, ugh. Now, when you look at goats, I am not a sheep nor am I a cow. They have a little bit more tolerance to copper than a sheep does. So you can maybe feed them a little bit more, but you still want to be very careful. Goats eat less mineral supplement than cows, so you want to make sure that the supplement that you're feeding them is either a sheep mineral or a goat mineral, preferentially a goat mineral, all right? You do not want to get them a horse mineral, a cow mineral, or a pig mineral, because we use high levels of copper, or a chicken feed, because chicken feed is high in copper, and you will cause death in your little goat. Physiological statuses. When to feed what? And I'm going to have growth. That's when they're first born, is a neonate. A newborn little baby goat is called a neonate, versus early growth versus late growth, and they're kind of growing up. This would maybe be 12 to 16 weeks. Early would probably be 6 to 8 weeks in my scale. Let's ignore the flushing. Let's go to gestation. Gestation means how long they're pregnant. They're going to be pregnant roughly 150 days, Joanne? Yep, 150 days. So we're going to break gestation, those 150 days that doe, that nanny, is pregnant, into 3 parts. So if you divide 150 by 3, you get 50 days, right? You don't have to worry about feeding anything different for those first 2 trimesters, those first 100 days. Don't worry. Just at what we call maintenance. You want them to maintain their weight. You don't want them to get fat. You don't want them to get thin. Just maintain. Okay? Maintenance. I wish I could go with maintenance. Some of us are easy keepers, right? All right. So are pygmy and dwarf goats. So the last third, that's when you get 90% of the fetal growth, of the embryos, of the baby kids that are cooking inside the uterus of the mother. That's when you get 90% of the fetal growth in the last 50 days. You watch that little doe, that little nanny. And is she starting to lose condition? And what I mean by condition, she's getting a little thin. And sometimes, if it's real cold outside, she might have a lot of hair. So you might want to touch her and see if you can feel the ribs. Or work very closely with your veterinarian. Do you think she's too thin? Ask somebody who will know. All right? Ask. During that last trimester, particularly the last 25, 30 days, maybe just a little bit of grain. And what I mean for a dwarf is probably no more than 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of grain a day. That's not very much. Remember, they're little bitty, and they're very prone to obesity. All right? Lactation, early versus late. Lactation, the early, in my perspective, would be the first 3 to 4 weeks. And this is if you're going to have just the little kids on them and you're not milking them. If you're going to continue to milk your goat, you again may need to supplement. You may need to supplement a little grain if they get a little thin. Again, work with someone who knows something about goats, who's raised goats, or worked with your veterinarian to see if they're too thin, okay? But be very careful when you use grain. Some yes, some going, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. You can do this. All right, and then maintenance. Now, this kind of shows you as we start going, this is maintenance. I have grams of calcium and grams of phosphorus, and you can kind of look the first 15 weeks of gestation, and here we have the 130 days and the lactations. It's just to show you those physiological stages in late gestation, early lactation, or the young growing animals is when they may need a little bit more energy because they need more nutrients, because they're growing, because they're producing a baby, or because they're producing milk. All right? So they will need a little bit more energy. Now this is something, again, I'm a picture person. Picture says 1,000 words. These slides were made in Australia in 1960. This is a picture of a ewe, a female sheep. She was not pregnant. She was at maintenance. She was humanely harvested, killed, and then what they did, they put her body in a tank of liquid nitrogen, and when her body was frozen, they took a cross saw and they cut her in half. Now, what you're looking at is the cross section of that sheep's body. This part right here, this big brown part, is the rumen. Remember I told you that plants have the microbes. They need a lot more space because they get broken down by the bugs. The bugs need a space. That's what the rumen looks like for a sheep or a goat at maintenance. Very big. If we go to the next slide, 88 days of 150 days. So this means we're going into the second trimester of a different sheep who was harvested. And you can see the mid-second trimester. We're not quite to 100 days. Look at, here's the embryo starting to grow now. Starting to grow. And look at the size of the rumen there. She's still got quite a bit of space, right? No? Yes. All right. This is 112 days of 150. And so we're in the early third trimester. Look at the embryo here. Look at the embryo. Go one more. This is 123, so we're the mid-third, so we're about 125 days, 2 fetuses. Look at the size of the rumen now. Go back one. See, at 112, she still had a lot of space, didn't she? Go forward. Look at now. So this is when she needs more nutrients. This is when, if you were going to feed a higher quality alfalfa hay, a third cutting alfalfa, is when she could use those nutrients. Again, work with someone who has raised sheep or goats, or work with your veterinarian on how to feed them if you have any questions during these times. All right? So maintenance is what you're going to feed for most of the time in the city. Body condition score. And this is Nancy's version because I like pictures. If you're really thin, like a skeletons that are walking around for Halloween, it would be a body condition score 1. If you're very big, you're a body condition score 10. So you're very, very fat. You don't have to body condition score me. So if you go to the next slide, if you go online and you go body condition score for goats, this is what you're going to see, and it's going to walk you through the process. Look at this poor goat. They're actually doing a body condition score 5. You'll see scores of 1 to 10, 1 to 9, and 1 to 5. That means that the skinny is always going to be 1, but sometimes obese is 5, sometimes it's 9, or sometimes it's 10. All right? Different systems. If we would all just get on the same page, it would be much easier. And I didn't even notice this when I cut and pasted. But notice body condition score 1. See how skinny? See how thin? And you can go online and you can find out how to body condition score a goat. But remember, most of the time a goat is going to be fat. Most of the time. In a non-productive setting. And you'll find that they are much more rotund. And so whether it's a 10 or a 9 or a 5, you kind of find the system you like, post it up on the wall, and learn how to body condition score your animals. And that will help you as you manage through them to see if you need to change the kind of hay that you're feeding them or to add any grain to the diet. But always do grain careful. Deal? This is actually an animal that died from obesity. It died from a heart attack and respiratory issues, but it actually died because it was fat. See all the fat? That's what happens to a lot of pygmy, a lot of dwarf goats when people don't know what they're doing and feeding them sweet feed from horses and all this other stuff. Don't do that. Don't let that happen to your goats. Find a mentor. I'm not saying that sheep people know everything. This one actually is about a body condition score too. You can kind of see, all right? Find someone who knows something about your animals. All right, management, daily care. You need to check them twice daily, minimum, morning and night. And sometimes there's going to be, if they're ready to kid, you may need to check more often. But minimum, you need to be there twice a day. Someone has to look at them twice a day, morning and at night. And if you're going to lock them up at night and let them out in the morning, it's perfect time. So feeding times, with a goat that's at maintenance, feeding them just once a day will be sufficient. But you're going to go and they're going to call when you walk out of the back door, and they're going to say, "Mama, feed me." And you're going to see that bale of hay and you're going to, "Oh no, they need more food." And then what's going to happen? They're going to get fat. So think healthy, treat. Feed them once a day if they're at maintenance. Now, if you have a doe that you're milking, you will need to feed them twice a day, and you will need to feed more nutrients. Remember the physiological status, all right? And learn to body condition score your animals. Water, always. You do not let that bucket run out. You do not let them relieve themselves in your bucket so you have all these nice little fecal particles in your bucket. Would you like to drink it? Dump it out. Keep it clean. And keep it heated, no ice. It doesn't have to be much above freezing, but it cannot be frozen for them, all right? Predators. I put the coyote, I put the fox, but in the middle of Fort Collins, a coyote or a fox may indeed be a problem, particularly if they're kidding or you have little ones, but your most common predators are going to be your neighbor's dogs. There is no enclosure rule for dogs. They get a run in the yard all night. And if they're side by side and they see these little boinking goats, they're not going to be able to resist themselves. You may be able to follow the rules, but the neighbor's dogs don't know the rules. So when you put up your fencing and when you put up your enclosure, before Marty comes out to do your inspection, think not only to keep your little goat in, to keep everything else out. And if your neighbor has children, you need to have a come to meeting, all right, and say, "These are goats. You can't pick on them. Do not let them tease on them. Do not let them feed them. You need to lay some ground rules down." Okay? So how you decide to do that, that's called neighborly relations. I wish you all good neighbor relations. Attitude. Anybody who's ever been around a goat knows goats have an attitude. They are kind of like comparing a dog and a cat. Who has the attitude between a dog and a cat? The cats. If you compare sheep and goats, it's the goat. They're very smart. Keep that in mind. They're very smart. Here we're going to talk a little bit. Remember I talked about billy goats earlier? This is a young lady. This was actually down in southwest Colorado, and she was kind of scratching these billy goats on the top of her head. Bad thing to do. Bad thing to do. Never touch your goat right on top of the head. Bad. Go underneath the neck and chuckle them. Teach the people not to put them on the head. Chuckle them under the throat. Why? This is a sheep. I know it's not. This is one of my big Rambouillets. But see that? That's not paint. That's blood. Because I hear my rams out at night, and this is a billy goat to do the same thing. They go out 100 foot apart and they go, bam! And they hit each other. And you can hear that bam clear across the yard. I have seen goats go through a concrete wall this thick. Now, put a child in place of that concrete wall. Put your elderly grandma. They don't differentiate. They will hit you. No billy goats in Fort Collins. They're very dangerous. I have roughly 35 rams in my pen. All of the students who work with me, no one goes into that ram pen alone, unless you have a 2x4. But that's probably not safe enough. I have been hit by rams just the same way a billy goat and knocked me flat on the ground in the snow. They can kill you. So even a little guy, they hit you right here, you will go down. You will go down. Switching gears slightly from the males to the females are given birth. If you decide you're going to have the little kid route and you take your doe to visit the nice billy goat from someone, and they do their little thing, smoke cigarettes later kind of thing, and 150 days later, we're going to have a baby kid or two. Again, this is probably a good time that you want to communicate and have a good working relationship with your veterinarian. Do your calendar thing. You can calculate out 150 days. You will hopefully have been feeding accordingly, working with your veterinarian, and once you see them go into labor, and you can tell, the first thing that they'll do is they'll do what we call lose their cervical plug. And that means you'll see this little string of mucus hanging down. My rule of thumb, and after I get done talking, we can ask the veterinarians, once I see that cervical plug lost, I give them 2 hours. And if I don't have babies on the ground, I'm getting help. Okay? That's just a rule of thumb that I use. You won't always see that cervical plug. So if you see them struggling to give birth, and it will be obvious, go online and look at some YouTubes. It's all online. I checked it. You'll know the behavior. You may want to connect with your veterinarian the first few times until you've worked through it. Now, when the kids are being born, you probably want to wear gloves. The concerns when this was going through City Council was Q fever and some other zoonotic diseases, so wear gloves. The placenta, or what we call the afterbirth, after the kids are born, you probably want to take that and put it in the garbage so the dogs, neighbors' dogs and other predators can't put it in the garbage, okay? So try to alleviate some of the concern of zoonotic or disease being transmitted between animals and people. But birth is the most marvelous thing. I've seen thousands, literally, of lambs being born. And every single time I see a baby lamb born, my heart just sings. It's the miracle of creation. It's the neatest thing. So I wish that if you want to do that, just take the precautions to keep you and your animals safe. Lactation, here we have a little nanny in a little milking stand. Go online if you're going to be doing this and see how to build a milking stand. That's how I learned to build mine. My only concern is if you decide that you're wanting to drink raw milk for its health benefits, be very careful. Pasteurization was created and used to protect people. And go online and find the health risk for raw milk. And go online and find some of the concerns today. And I'm not going to tell you they're your goats, you're going to do what you do, but I'm going to caution you on the health risks that are concerned with that. And we'll just let it go there. But lactation, be aware that we might need a little more energy. Keep your manure cleared up, because I live on a farm with 40 plus acres, which isn't a lot of land for a farm, but I still have flies in my kitchen. They're miserable. And even if you keep everything cleaned up, you will see an increase in flies. You will. Just be aware of some of the concerns. Will your vet take care of them? Can you afford vet care? Maybe you want to find a vet who knows something about small ruminants. Not every vet can take care of small ruminants. Ruminants like goats and sheep. So you want to find a veterinarian who knows what they're doing. Will you take care of my goat? Do you feel comfortable of helping me, of advising me with my goat? Do it before you even bring a goat on the place. You may want to do some health paper checks. I'm not a veterinarian, but there are several diseases that you may want to work with your veterinarian to make sure that the goat that you're bringing isn't sick before you even bring it onto your house. Because you're going to be living in very close proximity to this goat. You're going to be handling them. And we don't want to have anything happen. Can you afford the vet care? You may want to ask them, what's it going to cost me? What's it going to cost me to get that rabies shot? What's it going to cost me to get a health check? This, when I see this, when I walk out, because I should bring a picture of normal. I could have brought you a sample of little goat pellets. They're these beautiful little, they're beautiful. You can string them up and dry them, I guess. But this is not normal. And if you see this, you go, oh my God. Something's wrong with my goat. You best be checking a veterinarian. Unless you have a reason, you just put it on the fresh lawn clippings and maybe got a little bit of extra grass, wasn't used to it. It might make it a little bit loose. But when I see loose like this, I think coccidiosis. You need to work with your veterinarian. There's many symptoms that you will learn as you work with the animals to keep your animal healthy. Vaccinating your little kids before they leave at the age of 12 weeks, Clostridium perfringens. All of my little kids get CDT, we call it Clostridium perfringens and tetanus injections. Work with your veterinarian on that. Look in the book, follow those instructions. This is a lamb that actually died, got too much grain, someone who didn't know, and developed. It's an awful death. All right? Keep good records. Keep good records. I brought the goat home today. Her name is Heidi. I bought the Weather home today. His name is Hans. Veterinarian gave them rabies shot. Veterinarian's name is, his number is this. Emergency number, if you're going to go on vacation, someone's got to take care of the goat. Give them your veterinarian number before you leave. Let the neighbors know where you're going to be. Anyone who works on the land, I want to go home for Thanksgiving. My 300 sheep cannot feed themselves while I go home back to Iowa. It ain't going to work. So I got to pay somebody to come in. You may only have 2 goats, but just like your dog or cat, someone's got to take care of them. All right? Use common sense. Listen to what your animal says. How many of you have a dog? All right? If your dog doesn't feel good, do you know it? He said listlessness, diarrhea, a change in behavior. One of the best things that you can do is to watch goats. Learn what's good. If they're feeling good, they're going to boing! They're going to jump up and with joy. They're going to see you and they're going to call you when you come out of the back door. Mama! And if you pick up a baby goat, they're going to scream like a child. They're going to sound like you tortured them. I promise. They squeal. They cry. Oh my God, my neighbors are going to think I'm abusing my children. Learn what's normal. Learn what's normal. All right? I love this. And we can talk a little bit about dehorning, but I'm going to turn it over to the veterinarians as we start going through the question and answer. If they're born with horns, you probably want to alleviate the horns. I would suggest that you not do it yourself. Bring in a veterinarian who knows what they're doing, and to do that within the first few days, 3 or 4 days, within the first week of life, to remove them. Okay? So work with the horns. It's just one more thing to get caught up in your fences or someone getting hurt. So, questions, comments?
And on the dehorning, I actually would have thought that dehorning in town would be a requirement. Is that not true?
Lindsay?
Other communities require it. We did not, and it'll be something that we'll see how it goes. But I think that what we've heard from the vets and from the experts is that it is recommended.
I heard that milkweeds are bad.
Milkweeds?
Yes, milkweed.
Milkweeds?
Yeah, milkweed is bad for them to eat.
There are some toxins in milkweed. Milkweed and milk, you don't want them to eat them.
Okay, so
Go online and go under toxic plants and look up milkweed. I don't
they
have
grow
it
in
on.
my yard, so I was thinking,
Pull
do
them
I
up
just,
and put them
pull
in the
up
garbage.
For the night, Because I measured out 300 square feet. And
Good job.
Do they need a certain amount of room for where they're going to be at night? Because I heard if it's too small of a space, they're going to like freak out.
Okay. You don't want to put them like in a kennel.
Okay.
You want to give them enough room that they can move around carefully, that you can maybe put a little feed or a bucket of water, and they still can comfortably lay down.
Okay.
I would say with 2 dwarf goats, the size of the table, maybe a little bit bigger, is enough.
Okay. Like when one of the does is having a kid, I know since they want to be together, the other goat that we have, I mean, because I was thinking about, having a shed, a couple stalls. Are they going to be close to each other enough that they're not going to be upset, or?
Okay. When a doe is ready to have her baby, she's going to want to be by herself. Sometimes they may come and look at them. I have some sheep that will come and look at other sheep that are giving labor, but usually it's a young sheep that doesn't know what they're doing, or it's another sheep that's getting ready to have kids or lambs herself and wants to steal them. And so usually just being alone is fine.
If one of the kids is a male, knowing that we can, keeping them until 12 weeks, but are they going to be, dangerous to be around in that time?
No. No, they won't be, but they may be dangerous to the little ewe lambs because it's been documented they can breed at 12 weeks. So the little male goats, you probably want to work with a veterinarian and learn how to band them if you're not going to want it intact, where you alleviate the testicles that way, or work with a veterinarian to castrate them. They can be promiscuous very soon. And fences don't work. They breed through fences. Put that in your mind. Other questions on feeding, housing, management? Did I baffle you? Veterinarians, I have 2, Dr. Adams and Dr. Bowen.
Yeah, I thought you did a great job. Thanks so much. I want to caution people. My name's Reagan Adams. I'm with CSU Extension. I suspect there is going to be lists on Craigslist, entries into Craigslist for goat hay in the next year or 2. And you're going to find it's real cheap, and you should be careful about it, because a lot of times trashy hay is oftentimes defined as goat hay. Oh, goats can eat anything.
Wrong.
So don't fall for that. If by some chance, it doesn't mean that somebody says I have goat hay and it can be okay. Say it's not that high a quality, maybe it has a few weeds in it, that goat hay may be good, but don't just fall for anything that says goat hay. Check it for, if you do want to go look at it, check it for mold. Check it for the amount of weeds, all that kind of thing. But I just have a feeling this is a thing that will pop up, and I don't want people to take into it. The other thing is, if you can buy multiple bales of hay at one time, that's better for your animals, because you don't really want to change and go out and buy 1 bale of hay, and then that takes a while to go, and then another bale of hay, because that's hard on them. You want any kind of change in feed to occur very slowly. But Nancy did a great job. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. There was a question right here, Lindsay.
How many times do we need to check their water a day?
Check in the morning and check at night. If it's really hot outside and they have a small bucket, I'd get them a bigger bucket. All right, so that they don't run out of water ever. Good question, but particularly when it's hot, they will drink a lot more water.
Hi, I'm Joanne Bowen, and yes, I work with goats. You don't want to store your hay or straw in your garage or next to the house. And the reason that you don't want to do that is if it gets wet and gets bacteria and mold growing in it, it can have spontaneous combustion.
Yep.
And every year in this area, we see a couple of big hay fires. We've had them at the university where the whole barn is on fire. Yep. And so make sure and store your hay and straw away from the house. Don't put it in the garage, and make sure it's covered well so that it doesn't get wet and mold.
Okay. And what that is when it gets wet, mold starts heating, and it's the mold that's going to cause the spontaneous, or so they think. All righty, Lindsay, back to you.
Well, thanks everybody so much for coming today. We really, we're thrilled to have you all here and to take more questions. And Bill, I'm going to put your name back up here again. For any folks at home or any folks in the room that want to contact Bill to get the process started to get goats in the city of Fort Collins, this is the man you contact. Thanks, everybody.